Remember Portal? Sure you do. Remember how it came out of nowhere and it seemed like everybody loved it with all their hearts? You know, back when things didn't seem so grim. It was a lovely game for a lovelier time, and the same goes for Portal 2. Thinking about it reminds me of simpler days, when it seemed like everyone could at least agree on one thing. Playing with portals was awesome. Portal 2 is definitely on that short list of games that makes you feel good just by thinking about it. It's video game comfort food, and I don't know about all of you at home, but I could use some comfort food nowadays. Plus, revisiting Portal 2 gives us a chance to appreciate it all over again, for taking the risks that it did, and for ending up being a masterclass in video game comedy. My name's Gerard, and welcome to another episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, where I am recompleting the first 120 games I ever featured here on my channel. Feel free to join me as I kick back, forget about the woes of adult life, and settle into recompleting Portal 2. Nostalgia.
Yes!
Anytime a sleeper hit is due to get a sequel, red flags go up in my head. I can probably count on my hands the number of times an unassuming piece of media managed to blindside audiences' hearts and also managed to get a follow-up that succeeded in recapturing the magic. That shit's rare. But the attempts at cashing in on those little indie darlings are not rare. The first Paranormal Activity was all sorts of spooky. Then they got some money behind it, and we ended up with fucking ghost dimensions. Remember the Blair Witch? You know, because you're 16. That's cool, you know, just so that it was tight. But then we got this fucking thing. And even though I can only think of low budget horror examples right now, believe me when I say that corporations are on the lookout for new, exciting, wonderful ideas to strangle the life out of every single day. But Portal 2 was one of the lucky ones. That sequel was cared for and nurtured by the same people that created the first Tumble hit. Sure, it had a lot more money and time behind it than its predecessor, but it had just as much, if not more, care and passion put into it. That doesn't happen often, but that's how you get good sequels. Portal 2 was the game that defied all odds and somehow managed to surpass the overwhelming expectations of the original's rabid catchphrase spewing fans. And you know how I knew this game was something special? Because I played it before I touched the first one. Oh, I was well aware of the origins of Cake, and I knew why groups of nerds at gaming conventions would often burst into renditions of Still Alive. You just couldn't avoid Portal back then. You were bound to get some of that through osmosis. But go figure, when Portal 2 dropped in 2011, I absolutely loved it, despite the fact that I was already tired of the franchise. That's how good it was. It didn't rely on rehashed references to the first game. It forged an identity all its own that made for an unforgettable experience. Yes, it was still a first-person puzzle game that encourages players to bend or break the laws of physics. And it was still technically about a person all alone, forced to complete tests by a questionably sane robot lady. And yeah, it still contained plenty of references that made longtime fans squee in their gaming chairs. But Portal 2 is much deeper than those surface level connections to the first game. It's got plenty of noteworthy qualities all its own. And those qualities became all the more clear when I completed Portal 2 back on the show in 2015. I gained a newfound appreciation for how well the visuals were holding up. The writing seemed more stellar than ever, and I even grew to enjoy the co-op campaign more than the single-player one. An easy complete it for an old-time classic. And now, even more time has passed, and I've once again dived back into the world of Aperture Science. And sure enough, I've come to appreciate even more things than I ever did before. Namely, if you couldn't tell by now, how lucky we all are this wasn't just a lazy rehashing of the first game. No, Portal 2 made a lot of unexpected choices, and they may have been risky as all hell, but those subversions of expectations ultimately made this game the classic that it is. Let's be honest, Valve could have taken Shell, made her run through 19 or so newish test chambers, thrown in a couple of new mechanics, given GLaDOS a handful of fresh one-liners, and people would have eaten it up like groceries. But that's not what we got. We got boxes that move on their own. Not impressed? You should be. They're a new take on a fundamental aspect of the original game that adds a whole new dimension to classic Portal gameplay. Okay. You want something more exciting? How about excursion funnels? You don't move. They move you, adding a whole new wrinkle to the gameplay. But as I said before, a few new mechanics in the sequel are to be expected. But you know what came out of nowhere? These damn gels. What an absolute delight these things are. And I mean delight. No one wanted these gels. No one was even expecting them. They were innovative and completely surprising. And surprise is a key component of delight. One gel makes you bounce, one makes you run quick, and one completely blows the doors off of the design space by letting you make portals anywhere it falls. Whose idea was this? My point is, this stuff seems very much un-Portal. It was risky to throw it in. People could have hated it. But its inclusion and almost every other way that this game bucked assumptions made Portal 2 better than it would have been otherwise. And now that both these games are fresh in my mind, I am able to appreciate those risks more than ever. In hindsight, I'm seriously surprised there wasn't more blowback against these decisions. You know how lucky we were that there was never a hashtag not my GLaDOS Twitter campaign when Wheatley was revealed as a main character? I can easily imagine him being perceived as the Poochie of Portal, throwing off the perfect balance between GLaDOS and Shell. But people love Wheatley, and they should, because this little asshole is lovable. But more so because Valve skillfully implemented a brand new character into a formula that was already really working well. And he's not some throwaway cameo. Wheatley's here for the whole ride. And he's got specific relationships all his own. His relationship with Shell is very different from the way he feels about GLaDOS, and vice versa, and versa. Look, they all feel different about each other. You know, like good, well-written characters should. Well, maybe not Shell. There's really no telling how she feels about anyone, well, with her being a silent, virtually faceless shell of a character. Oh. But real talk, it's okay that Shell has no character. She's an avatar. I get it. But more importantly, her lack of character is made up in spades by GLaDOS and Wheatley's abundance of character. And you want to talk about risk? These dudes had the balls to fuck with the fan favorite established dynamics between Shell and GLaDOS. You get your requisite dose of classic one-sided antagonism between them in the early game. And then, bam, they smack you in the face with an uneasy alliance and even learning to respect each other? Crazy. The people behind Portal 2 had the guts to mess with the duo as archetypal as Tom and Jerry, but because they did, we get to see shades of GLaDOS never thought possible. And that goes for Wheatley too. He goes from knuckleheaded sidekick to a much more critical part of the narrative. Completing Portal 2 all over again made me notice just how much of a departure it is from the first game, and how much I'm glad that it chose to be different. But the risks the devs took exist on an even more fundamental level. The very structure of Portal 2 feels totally unlike that of the first game. The original was basically broken down into two halves, with the ordered individual testing chambers eventually giving way to the vast messy bowels, but in Portal 2, it feels like there's a distinct 3-act structure. Shell starts off by pushing through some classic looking tests, then she drops down to the depths of old Aperture, where she encounters the gel and the disembodied voice of Cave Johnson, everyone's new favorite quote factory.
In case you got covered in that repulsion gel, here's some advice the lab boys gave me. Do not get covered in the repulsion gel. We haven't entirely nailed down what element it is yet, but I'll tell you this, it's a lively one, and it does not like the human skeleton.
Then it's back up to the dark, strange, almost broken test chambers before the climax. The shifts between these areas each feature their own distinct mechanics, aesthetics, and changes in the characters' relationships. That ain't exactly how the old one worked. Let's not forget, there's a co-op campaign here too. And just like the last time I completed it, I was carried through the entire experience by my good friend Dev2000. He definitely knew what he was doing way more than I did. And yeah, blazing through these co-op levels was very relaxing, thank you for asking. Maybe that's why I still liked Portal 2's co-op campaign more than the single player one. Or maybe it's the fact that this co-op mode is put together extremely well and opens up a ton of gameplay space that would have otherwise gone untouched. 4 portals across 2 characters makes for some truly unique situations and experiences. And we never would have had that had the people at Valve never taken the risk in stepping out of their comfort zone. Man, am I thankful that I live in a timeline where this mode is universally praised and not the one where there are countless threads about how it was shoved down our throats and is a waste of space that could have been more GLaDOS songs. And I'm thankful to Dev2000 for doing it with me all over again. Gracias. Something that this game does have in common with the original is the writing, in that they're both fantastic. But while last time around, I recognized that this is how writing should be done in video games, I'm now realizing more that Portal 2 is how comedy should be handled in games. Yeah, I know that's not exactly a controversial statement. Portal has always been funny, with several obvious moments meant to squeeze laughs out of the player. You know, ha ha, the silly ball fell on the floor. But Portal 2's brilliance lies in how it exercises subtlety in its comedy. Take GLaDOS, who's obviously pissed at Shell for what Shell did to her in the last game. Now, there are a lot of ways you can craft GLaDOS' dialogue to reflect that. What the writers ultimately went with were lines that implied a rage bubbling just under the surface, with that fury becoming more overt and more petty over time.
This plate must not be calibrated to someone of your generousness. I'll add a few zeros to the maximum weight. You look great, by the way. Very healthy.
But instead, they could have easily had GLaDOS come out the gates spewing hot shit Shell's way, which would have been believable enough, but not nearly as relatable, not nearly as nuanced, not nearly as subtle, and not nearly as funny. In fact, in one of the commentary tracks for this game, they confirm that they tried the more overt approach before switching to the slow burn. They recognize that a catty, biting, sarcastic relationship is more fun than the one where a robot would just call a mute woman a bitch. Where do you go from there? GLaDOS may as well pull out a Glock and just shoot Shell after that. And the meticulous writing would be nothing if it weren't for Portal 2's top-notch voice cast. Everyone knows that Ellen McLean's performance as GLaDOS is legendary, but I never stopped and thought about the work that must have gone into believably capturing and conveying the emotions of this robot lady. Think about it. She was an all-powerful overlord who had a lowly slave she considered beneath her, who then escaped, eventually killing her. Then she gets brought back to life, but only after spending countless years dreaming up of the ways to enact her revenge one day. That's a specific ass relationship and a specific ass viewpoint. And thankfully, McLean's performance captures all the juicy nuances.
So, how are you holding up? Because I'm a potato. Oh, good. My slow clap processor made it into this thing. So we have that.
The same goes for Stephen Merchant as Wheatley. He's not just funny because of his one-liners. What's really hilarious is watching his journey from powerless bumbler to powerful bumbler, and Merchant knocks it out of the park.
And don't think I'm not onto you too, lady. You know what you are? Selfish. I've done nothing but sacrifice to get us here. And what have you sacrificed? Nothing. Zero. All you've done is boss me around. Well, now who's the boss? Who's the boss? It's me.
I could go on and on about the things that this game does well. In fact, I kind of already have, as have several other people at this point. Portal 2 is beloved and for good reason, but completing it again has shown me that it has far more to appreciate than what's gleaned from an initial playthrough, even if that playthrough is to completion. The game's got a lot to offer, so much so that there's no telling what someone else might discover and learn to love the next time they play it. What's that? No significant unlockables at all? It's all good to me, man. Of course, I'd always prefer the game to acknowledge my efforts, but when the experience of completing it is as enjoyable and short as this one, it's not a deal breaker. Not only is this game comfort food, it's comfort food that doesn't immediately give you the itis after. I don't feel bogged down, I don't feel sick, I just feel good. It's healthy comfort food. How rare is that? There aren't any real rewards for completing it, so it's not the perfect completion experience. But Portal 2 is worth your time, whether you're playing it for the first time or coming back for seconds. When I recompleted Portal 2, there were 9 deaths versus the 33 deaths the last time I completed it. Either I've gotten better or Dev 2000 has gotten better at escorting me. Either way, everybody wins. 2 campaigns played through, which is the same amount as last time. Both of these campaigns are absolute masterpieces that are as rewarding as they are accessible. 51 achievements unlocked, which honestly were still stupid easy but fun, which is how all achievements should be in my opinion. 15 hours of total playtime,
And one new year that's been kicked off with a classic relaxing game that's a joy to play. And it's still a joy to complete too. I know I'm not saying anything new here when I praise Portal 2, but it does feel good to notice and appreciate more now that I've come back to it. There's not much by the way of rewards, but this game is still one of the all-time greats. So, with that in mind, guys, I still give this game my completionist rating of complete it.
Complete it!
Demand to see Life's manager! make life rue the day and thought it could give Cave Johnson lemons. Do you know who I am? I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemons. I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down.